Celeste Haynes was violently beaten by a white cop during a routine stop right in front of her young son. No cause, no charges, no justice. The system told her to stay silent to move on. But her husband, Darius Haynes, a high-ranking U.S. Marshal, had one mission: expose the truth they tried to bury and hold every hand behind the abuse accountable. What happens when a man with the power to investigate turns that power on the very people who protect themselves through silence? If this story grabs you, like, share, and subscribe. Let's rewind to the moment it all began. The sky was soft gray, stretched over a long two-lane road, cutting through the Mississippi pines. Celeste Haynes kept both hands steady on the wheel. Her son, Noah, just 7, was behind her in his booster seat singing a made-up song about clouds and peanut butter. They were 10 minutes from home. Then came the flash of red and blue in the rearview mirror. Celeste's stomach dropped. She eased the car to the side, her breath already tight. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because she had lived long enough to know what those lights could mean. "Baby," she said gently, "put your hands on your lap and stay real still." "Okay." "Is it the police?" Noah asked, eyes wide. "It is. Just stay quiet, honey." A white patrol cruiser idled behind her. Then came the sound: crunching boots. One set, heavy, determined. She rolled the window halfway down as the officer approached. He didn't even glance at Noah in the back seat. Didn't introduce himself. Just leaned in, lips tight. "License, registration, step out of the vehicle." Celeste blinked. I'm sorry, sir, was I speeding?" I said, "Step out." "I'd like to understand the reason," she said, voice calm but firm. "And I'd prefer to call my husband. He works in—" "I don't care if your husband is the president. Step out now." Her breath caught. "Officer, I'm not refusing. That's when he yanked the door open. And before Celeste could even react, his hand clamped around her arm and jerked her from the seat like she weighed nothing. "Don't touch my mom!" Noah screamed from the back. Celeste's heel caught on the frame and she fell hard, elbow first, shoulder twisting. Then came the blow. A brutal fist slammed down across her shoulder blade, sending pain shooting down her spine. She hit the ground with a gasp. "What are you doing?" she cried, face scraping the asphalt. "My son's right there. He's a child." "Then maybe next time you'll learn to listen." Officer Ransom spat. His voice was low and full of something colder than rage. A second officer had stepped out by now, Officer Clay. Young, early 20s, face pale under his cap. His eyes flicked between Celeste and Ransom, clearly shaken. "Sir, maybe we—" Clay started. "Get back in the car," Ransom barked, without looking at him. "Now." Clay froze, then obeyed. Celeste was still on the ground, one knee bleeding, her son crying inside the car. I didn't resist. She choked out, staring up at him. "You had no right." Ransom leaned closer, lowering his voice. "No one's gonna care what you say. No body cam, no witnesses. So if I were you, I'd keep that mouth shut, ma'am." And with that, he turned and walked away. They didn't arrest her, didn't write a citation, didn't say another word. The cruiser rolled away, its tires kicking up gravel. Silence returned to the roadside like a slap. Celeste lay still for a long second before pushing herself upright, wincing with every movement. Her shirt was torn. Her arms were trembling. She limped to the car and pulled open the back door. Noah was curled up, eyes swollen, whispering through his tears. "Did I do something wrong? Mommy, was it my fault they got mad at you? That broke her, not the bruises, not the blood, not even the rage, but that question." Celeste wrapped her arms around him, holding him so tight she could feel his heartbeat through his ribs. "No, baby. No, it wasn't you. None of this was your fault." But deep down, something inside her knew it would be her responsibility to make sure he never asked that again. As she sat there on the roadside holding her child, Celeste realized this wasn't just about pain anymore. It was about justice, and someone was going to pay for what just happened. She didn't know how yet, but her husband would, and he wouldn't come with anger. He'd come with authority, with access, with power. And once he stepped in, things would never be the same. That night, the house was too quiet. Celeste had washed the blood off her knees, changed into an old sweater, and curled up on the couch with Noah asleep beside her. She hadn't moved in over an hour. The TV played something, but she couldn't follow it. Her shoulder ached, but not as much as her pride. The front door opened softly like always. Darius Haynes stepped inside, set his keys down, and took off his coat in silence. He didn't have to ask. One look at Celeste told him something was very wrong. She turned to him, eyes still wide from hours ago. "It was a traffic stop," she whispered. "He didn't even give a reason, Darius. Just told me to step out. And when I hesitated, he dragged me out, hit me. In front of our son." Darius didn't speak. He just walked over, dropped to one knee, and gently took her hand. It trembled in his. He watched the whole thing, she said. Noah saw everything. He thinks it was his fault. Darius looked toward the hallway. "He's asleep." She nodded. Exhausted himself, crying, still silent. Darius rose and walked to the garage. Moments later, he returned with the dash cam drive. He plugged it into the laptop, brows furrowed. Click, click, silence. Then he muttered something under his breath. Not anger, just cold, precise realization. The footage is gone. Celeste stiffened. "What?" They wiped the file. He stared at the screen, jaw tightening. Remotely. They had access. She leaned forward. "You mean the officers?" He didn't answer that. Instead, his voice dropped so low she almost didn't hear it. "I'll take care of it." Then, as if nothing more needed to be said, he closed the laptop and stood still for a moment, just breathing. That's when Noah wandered out holding a piece of paper clutched to his chest. His hair was messy, face flushed from sleep. Without a word, he walked over and handed the drawing to Celeste. It was childlike messy, but unmistakable. A stick-figure woman with curly hair lying on the ground. A police car. A crying boy in the back seat. And above them, written in shaky handwriting, "I love you, Mommy. You didn't do anything wrong." Celeste's hand flew to her mouth. Darius took the drawing and stared at it for a long, heavy moment. His eyes didn't blink. Then, quietly, he bent down and hugged his son. "You're a strong little man," he said. "Go on back to sleep, okay? Daddy's here now." Noah nodded and padded back to his room. The moment the boy's door clicked shut, Darius turned toward his study. Celeste followed. She stood in the doorway as he sat down at a different desk, one he rarely used. It was locked with a fingerprint scan, and when it opened, what lay inside was not ordinary. Celeste's breath caught. "What are you doing?" she asked. Darius didn't look at her. He opened a private terminal, one that didn't run on the home internet, and began typing. Lines of encrypted code blinked across the screen. This isn't like before," she said, stepping closer. "You told me you were done, that you wouldn't use that access again unless—" He paused, then finally spoke, voice like steel under velvet. "They laid hands on you." "And I'm okay," she insisted. "I'm bruised, not broken. I don't want them coming for you, too." He turned in his chair, looked her straight in the eyes. "This isn't just about us anymore, Celeste. It's about what Noah saw. It's about the next woman this officer decides to pull over." Celeste blinked back tears. She had always known her husband was quiet, controlled. But now there was something deeper behind his stillness, like a fire that burned slow, but unforgiving. She reached for his hand. "Promise me. You'll stay within the line." Darius closed the terminal. "No," he said softly. I'm done coloring inside lines that never protected us. And just like that, she knew. This wasn't revenge. It was precision. And Darius Haynes was about to become every racist cop's worst nightmare because he wasn't just a U.S. Marshal. He was a man with access clearance and now, a reason. Celeste Haynes didn't sleep that night. Her body ached, but it was her spirit that trembled more. By morning, she had made up her mind. She dressed carefully, pressed blouse, neat jeans, the soft scarf Noah had given her for Mother's Day. She needed to look like everything they refused to see, composed, clear, and human. Darius offered to drive her, but she declined. If they can look me in the eye while doing that to me, she said, then they can look me in the eye when I report it. The police station was small, low brick with a flagpole out front that creaked gently in the breeze. Celeste walked in steady, holding her breath like armor. Behind the desk sat a young white woman with a glossy ponytail and chipped nail polish. She looked up lazily. I'd like to file a complaint against Officer Ransom. Celeste said, her voice even, but not soft. The receptionist barely blinked. What for? Celeste paused. For using excessive force. He assaulted me yesterday in front of my son. The woman gave a dry smile. Ransom's a good cop. Maybe you just didn't understand what was happening. Sometimes things look different when emotions run high. Celeste's eyes narrowed. Is there a formal complaint form I can fill out? The woman sighed and reached for a stack of papers, handing one over without looking her way. As Celeste leaned on the counter to fill it out, she felt a shift behind her. Heavy boots. A shadow. Look who's back, came a voice slick and amused. Officer Ransom. He strolled past like he owned the room, his badge catching the fluorescent light. He leaned in closer, lowered his voice just enough. Next time, don't resist, sweetheart. Could save you the trouble. Celeste didn't flinch, didn't blink, but her grip on the pen tightened. He gave a little wink and walked off. From the far corner of the room, a voice drifted, barely a whisper. An old man, black, leaning on a cane, waiting his turn for something no one seemed in a rush to give. He didn't look at her, but his words were meant for her alone. You're not the first, baby girl, he said, and you won't be the last, unless you're the one who makes it stop. Celeste stood still. That sentence sank deeper than Ransom's threats ever could. She folded the form, handed it back. No one even said thank you. As she walked out into the morning light, the world didn't feel warmer. But something in her had changed. This wasn't just about dignity anymore. It was about Noah. It was about not letting him grow up thinking fear was normal, silence was safety, or that being black meant you had to keep your head down and pray not to be noticed. Back home, Darius looked up as she entered. He was sitting beside Noah, who was busy coloring. He showed up, she said, pulling off her scarf. Ransom, smiling. Darius didn't interrupt. They didn't care. They weren't even pretending to care. And someone who looked like us, he said. I wasn't the first. She sat down, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath all morning. Noah looked up from his drawing and said, I drew this today. It's you and me. You're standing up again. Celeste took the paper. It was childish, bright, uneven, but powerful. She nodded, then turned to Darius. I'll testify, she said. Do whatever you have to. Just don't let them do this to anyone else. Darius met her gaze. For a long moment, neither said a word. Finally, he nodded once. But deep in his eyes, something had already begun. The next morning, while Celeste packed Noah's lunch and kissed him goodbye for school, Darius quietly slipped on a dark suit and grabbed a small leather case from the top shelf of the closet. He didn't say much. He never did. Celeste watched him for a moment. Where are you going? He looked at her with that calm steadiness she had always leaned on. I just need to check something. He kissed her forehead gently. We'll talk tonight. Then he was gone. The security gate scanned his badge with a sharp beep, and the armed guard on duty straightened. Morning, Deputy Director Haynes. Darius gave a small nod. No need for theatrics. He walked through the sterile white hallway of the U.S. Marshal's Service, Regional Internal Affairs Division, like he had done 100 times before. But today felt different. He wasn't walking in as a federal officer. He was walking in as a husband. Inside his private office, unmarked, windowless, and cold, he powered up his terminal. The screens lit up, humming like a quiet army at his command. Darius typed in, Subject Officer Colton Ransom. Affiliation Rankin County Sheriff's Department, Mississippi. Status active. The files opened one by one, and what he saw made his jaw tighten. 4 prior use of force complaints, all from black citizens, all closed within 7 days, no follow-up, no interviews, no disciplinary action. It wasn't just a bad apple. It was a spoiled barrel, and the lid had been nailed shut. Darius leaned back in his chair, staring at the timeline. The dates were spaced just enough to avoid suspicion, but close enough to show a pattern if someone was actually looking. He clicked into internal incident summaries. Sparse. Sanitized. Language crafted to avoid liability. He'd seen it all before. Then he remembered a name, an old contact buried deep in the system. Someone who used to work surveillance and whistleblower cases. He encrypted a message, need full unredacted incident logs on Officer Colton Ransom. Include video records, bodycam archives, dispatch transcripts, confidential, silent chain. DH. Less than an hour later, a file pinged back. At the top, restricted archived evidence, year 2019. Darius opened the video. A shaky dash cam. Night. Rain. Officer Ransom's voice was clear. Get out of the damn car. A young black teenager, maybe 17, stepped out with hands up. Ransom shoved him hard into the hood, then without warning wrapped one arm around the boy's neck. The teen struggled, gasping. No, no, sir! Please! The screen shook as another officer stepped in, obscuring the frame. Then black. The clip cut out. But the report summary beneath it chilled Darius more than the footage. Subject Jamal L. Green, age 17. Status missing. Last seen June 3, 2019. No follow-up investigation logged. Case closed. Runaway. Darius closed the file slowly, resting both hands on the desk. He exhaled through his nose, quiet but heavy. This wasn't about Celeste anymore. This man had left a trail of bruises long before he laid a hand on her, and the system had swept each one under the rug. Darius tapped into the cross-agency database, bypassing clearance walls he had designed himself. He searched Officer Ransom. Internal watch list flag nothing. Corruption index, Rankin County high activity, multiple alerts. 3 closed whistleblower cases. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. It's bigger than Ransom. Just then his personal line buzzed. He answered with a tight, go ahead. A muffled voice replied, there's more. Internal memo. Sheriff's Department had a policy of verbal correction for minor resistance. Off-the-record enforcement. I'll forward the scan. Darius stared at the wall. He knew what that meant. They had created their own rules, their own definitions of resistance, and no one had challenged it until now. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and whispered to himself, you didn't just pick the wrong woman, Ransom. You picked the wrong damn family. Celeste sat alone in the waiting room, her fingers gripping the edge of her purse so tightly the leather creaked. The walls were beige, sterile, almost like a hospital, but colder somehow. A receptionist called her name. Mrs. Haynes, right this way. She stood, straightened her blouse, and walked into a glass-walled conference room. 2 people were already seated at the long table. A white man in a sleek gray suit stood up to greet her, smiling too politely. Celeste, thank you for coming. I'm Raymond Barnes, outside counsel for the department. Please sit. She hesitated, then sat down across from him. At the far end of the room, a black woman in her late 50s sat quietly, hands folded, eyes lowered. She didn't say a word. Raymond leaned forward, folding his hands like a pastor about to deliver a sermon. We understand that what happened was deeply upsetting. No one wants to see anyone hurt, and certainly not someone like yourself. Celeste raised an eyebrow. Someone like myself. He backtracked smoothly. A mother, a teacher, a community figure. That's all I meant. She didn't respond. Raymond cleared his throat and slid a folder across the table. We're here in good faith, Mrs. Haynes. To avoid unnecessary distress for your family, for the department, for everyone. Inside that envelope is a settlement offer. $75,000, tax-free, along with a standard non-disclosure agreement. He said it like he was offering a gift. Celeste didn't touch the folder. Raymond kept going, voice smooth like silk over barbed wire. You won't have to go through the courts, the media, or any of the mess that can come from dragging something like this into the spotlight. Just sign and walk away. Clean. Quiet. That word echoed quiet. Still, she didn't say a word. The woman at the end of the table finally lifted her head. Just for a second. Their eyes met, and Celeste saw it a flicker of pain. Recognition. Shame. It was like looking into a mirror of what she could become. Raymond leaned in one last time. Think of your son. Do you really want him to grow up watching his mother get torn apart in depositions and cross-examinations? Celeste slowly stood up. She didn't yell. She didn't slam the folder. She simply said, I'll think about it, and walked out. She didn't cry in the car. She waited until she was back home, until she was alone in the hallway by the kitchen. And then it hit her the way that offer felt like someone trying to erase her pain with a signature. Like her worth had a price tag. That night, while Darius worked in the study, Celeste sat at the dining table with a pen and a blank piece of paper. She wrote, To whom it may concern. I am declining your offer of $75,000. Not because the money isn't tempting. Not because I don't understand the risk of speaking out. But because silence is how this continues. I was not beaten in the dark to later disappear into it. You beat me to silence me. But now, I speak louder than you ever imagined. Celeste Haynes. She signed it, folded it. Then, with hands that no longer trembled, she scanned it and hit send. Not just to the department, but to 4 local news stations, 2 national outlets, and 1 contact Darius had quietly passed her with a knowing nod. The next morning, her words were all over the internet. One news site ran it under the headline, Black Mother Rejects Hush Money. Says, silence is how it continues. Another simply called it, She Refused. Celeste didn't read the comments. She just sat on the porch with Noah in her lap and watched the sunrise. Inside, Darius stood by the window watching them. His phone buzzed once. Then again. Media's got it, he said softly to himself. And now, they'll come knocking. It started with a spark. Clara Mendez was sitting in her cramped New York apartment, half listening to cable news while editing a piece on school funding. The news anchor's voice drifted in. A mother from Mississippi rejects settlement over alleged police assault. She looked up. The words Celeste Haynes flashed across the screen, and right below it, a quote in white letters on black. You beat me to silence me. But now I speak louder than you ever imagined. Clara froze, not because the quote was dramatic, but because it was real. It had the raw edge of someone who wasn't playing for sympathy, but for truth. She clicked off the TV, found the full letter online, and read it twice. By the 3rd time, she was already typing. Clara Mendez, 32, had been burned before. 3 years ago, she lost her job at a local station in Texas after airing a story about a Latino teen allegedly killed during a botched arrest. No one sued her, but someone whispered just enough in the right ears to make sure no newsroom called her again. Now she worked freelance, mostly human interest, quiet stuff. But this letter wasn't quiet. It was a match waiting for fuel. And Clara had gasoline. The drive to Mississippi took most of the night. Clara rehearsed 100 different ways to ask Celeste for an interview and discarded all of them. When she finally knocked on the Haynes' front door, she was nervous. Not professionally, personally. Celeste opened the door in jeans and a loose sweatshirt, her eyes still tired but no longer trembling. "I saw your letter," Clara said softly, "and I think the whole country should hear your voice." Celeste didn't answer right away. Then she stepped aside and let her in. They didn't film at first. Clara just listened. She let Celeste tell it in her own words. The road, the grip on her arm, the silence at the station, the envelope on the table. She took notes, but mostly she nodded. Let the pauses breathe. Let the tears fall. Then Clara asked gently, "Would you be okay sharing this on camera? It could help others understand." Celeste hesitated. That's when Noah walked into the room holding a fresh drawing. He had drawn his mother again this time, standing holding his hand. Behind them was a sun and a badge with a giant red X over it. Celeste looked down at the picture and nodded. The live stream went up that afternoon. Clara didn't dress it up with music or graphics, just Celeste speaking plainly with Noah coloring beside her on the couch. It lasted 8 minutes. But by the third minute, 12,000 people were watching. By the end of the day, over 4.5 million had clicked in. And it wasn't just the views. The comments came pouring in. "I see my mother in her. This is what strength looks like. Why isn't this on the news?" That night, Clara's inbox pinged. The subject line read, "He did it to my cousin. I have proof." She clicked. It was from a former police officer, anonymous, but the email was detailed. Dates, incident numbers, internal memos, even dashcam footage. He claimed that Ransom had been protected by his precinct for years, that several reports had quietly disappeared or were dismissed before IA could even begin. One line hit hard. They let him stay on the streets because nobody ever pushed back loud enough. Clara forwarded everything to her encrypted drive, and then she called Darius Haynes. The next morning, Ransom appeared on the local news. Slick hair, starched uniform, smile too forced. "I've served this county with honor for 12 years, he said. "And I followed protocol. Let's not rush to judgment based on internet drama." It backfired instantly. Comments flooded in. Protocol doesn't include beating mothers. He just proved her point. He's smiling like this is a game. Clara's follow-up post included side-by-side screenshots, Ransom grinning on TV next to Noah's drawing with the red X. It didn't need a caption. By then, the hashtag was already trending. Stand with Celeste. Celeste sat in the kitchen that night, watching her phone vibrate with message after message, support threats, media requests, old friends reaching out. She looked at Clara. "You sure you're ready for this storm?" Clara smiled, but her voice was calm. "I've walked through worse, but you're not just walking through it. You lit the damn fire." Celeste looked down at Noah sleeping on the couch and whispered, "Then I hope it burns clean." By the end of that week, the story was no longer just about Mississippi. It was about a system. Clara Mendez sat quietly across from Darius Haynes in a nondescript federal building just outside D.C., the kind of place that didn't even have a sign out front. She slid the flash drive across the table. No words, just the truth packaged and ready. Inside, dashcam footage, audio from whistleblowers, internal memos sealed and buried, names, dates, patterns. Darius added one more file, a signed affidavit from Celeste. He looked at Clara. "Once this goes in, there's no pulling back." Clara met his gaze. "Good, because we've already come too far." The office of the Inspector General didn't respond for 2 days. Then came the call. A formal review had been opened, but it didn't stop there. News broke that a senior black senator, Marcus Tillman of Illinois, had read Celeste's letter aloud on the Senate floor. His voice rang steady. If the law isn't safe for black women and their children, then who exactly is it protecting? He demanded an internal oversight hearing public, not behind closed doors. The clip went viral within hours. People weren't just angry anymore. They were listening. Darius wasn't used to the spotlight. He was a man who operated behind double encrypted networks and silent back channels. But now he was leaning forward. He called in people he hadn't spoken to in years. Officers who'd walked away. Analysts who'd been discredited for asking too many questions. Lawyers who couldn't sleep because of the cases they were forced to drop. They met in an underground room at the U.S. Marshal Regional HQ. The only rule, no cameras. Every person at that table had once been punished for trying to do the right thing. Darius stood at the head jacket, off sleeves rolled. This isn't about one bad cop, he said. This is about the silence that allows him. They called themselves Unit Zero. Not because it sounded tough, but because they had all started from nothing. No credibility, no protection, no permission. Just one thing, proof. Over the next 48 hours, they began connecting dots. A precinct in Baton Rouge with 3 resolved brutality claims that matched Ransom's pattern. A judge in Mississippi who dismissed every misconduct case tied to the same 5 officers. A retired dispatcher who'd once logged a domestic violence call involving Ransom, one that never made it to report. Every file opened led to another stone turned, and beneath every stone was something rotten. Meanwhile, Clara's inbox overflowed. More emails, more voices. A nurse from Biloxi who remembered treating a teen boy with neck bruises and no name back in 2019. A public defender who said she was forced to settle a civil case involving Ransom because the sheriff's office made the family disappear. A church pastor who told her, "We buried more than one boy in silence." The pressure built. The Justice Department sent a liaison. CNN and MSNBC requested interviews with Celeste, but she refused. Instead, she wrote another letter. Shorter this time. It ended with one line: "Justice doesn't shout. It stands." Clara posted the letter that night. It was retweeted by Viola Davis, then Michelle Obama. By morning, even conservative outlets were discussing the case not because they cared, but because they had to. Senator Tillman's team reached out to Darius. "Your task force," the aide said. "Can you testify under oath?" Darius didn't hesitate. "Yes." And he added, "So can others." The next morning, Unit Zero prepared their evidence packets. Everything had to be bulletproof. No hearsay, no guesswork. Just data cross-referenced, time-stamped, and undeniable. Darius sent out a message to each member. "We're not just walking into a hearing. We're walking into history." At the Capitol, the hearing room filled quickly. Cameras, reporters, a line wrapped around the building. On the back row sat Celeste, wearing a simple black blazer, Noah next to her, holding her hand. He'd brought another drawing. This time it was of a woman standing at a podium. Behind her, a flag and people watching. He titled it, "My Mom's Truth." When Darius stepped up to the mic, the room went quiet. He looked around, then down at his hands folded once before him, and finally to the senators. "My name is Deputy Director Darius Haynes. I am a husband. I am a father. And I am a federal officer who took an oath to defend justice not just when it's easy, but when it's inconvenient." He paused. Because justice without accountability is just theater. No one in that hearing room blinked when Celeste Haynes stepped up to the microphone. The cameras rolled. The air felt heavy, but she didn't shake. She stood tall, one hand on the table, the other clutching Noah's drawing folded neatly in her coat pocket. "My name is Celeste Haynes," she began, her voice steady, "and I'm not here today as a victim. I'm here as a witness, and as a mother who refuses to let silence be my son's inheritance." For the next 7 minutes, the nation listened. Celeste told the story not just of what happened to her, but what had been happening to women like her for years. Behind her on a large screen, Clara queued up evidence. First came the internal complaint records, dozens of them, but each stamped the same way: closed. No action. The senators leaned in as Clara zoomed in on timestamps that had been altered, dates switched, pages swapped out. Then the voice of a whistleblower echoed through the chamber, distorted for protection but unmistakably damning. We were told to delete any reports that made the department look bad. Ransom had backing, unspoken but absolute. The crowd murmured. One senator shook his head in disbelief, and then came the moment that froze every heartbeat. Clara hit play on a clip from 2019. The footage was shaky, likely filmed on a phone from behind a fence, but it was clear enough. Officer Ransom stood over a teenage black boy, his knee pinning the boy's back. The boy was coughing, pleading. Ransom snarled something inaudible but hateful, then darkness. No one had seen that boy again. The screen went black, and the room silent, unbearably so. When Ransom was called to testify, he didn't strut this time. He looked smaller, paler, sweat gathering at his collar. He adjusted the mic. "I was following protocol," he said. "Things looked worse than they were." A senator raised an eyebrow. "You're referring to the video where a minor is screaming for help." Ransom stammered. "I was acting under pressure. My superiors. They signed off on everything. I was never told, officer. The senator interrupted. You're under oath. That's when it happened." From the back of the room, a voice rose. "I saw it." Heads turned. It was Officer Clay. He stood slowly, eyes not on Ransom, but on Celeste. "I was there that day on the road," he said, "when he dragged her out. When he hit her." I froze. I didn't stop him. I should have. I regret it every single day. A hush fell again. Ransom turned, his face pale with panic. "Clay, what are you doing?" But Clay didn't flinch. "I'm doing what I should have done back then." He looked to the committee. There are others like me. Officers who stayed quiet, who were scared to speak. But silence is what got us here. Not anymore. A ripple spread across the room, one of realization. This wasn't just about Ransom. This was about how many Ransoms had been protected, about how many Clays had stayed silent, and how many Celestes had gone unheard. Senator Tillman leaned into the mic. "Officer Ransom, you are under investigation for obstruction, assault, and falsifying reports. This committee will forward all evidence to the Department of Justice." And then he turned to Celeste. "Mrs. Haynes, your courage didn't just speak. It echoed. Outside, crowds gathered around giant screens. Inside, Celeste stepped down. Noah met her with both arms wrapped tight around her waist. He whispered, "Did you win?" She smiled, tired but alive. "We're not done, but we're not alone anymore." That night, news outlets played the clip of Officer Clay's confession over and over. A new headline swept the nation. The system shook, and someone finally spoke. The headlines came fast, sharp, and relentless. Officer Ransom, suspended indefinitely. DOJ launches. Criminal probe. 3 more officers resign, following explosive hearing. A new reckoning for small-town policing. For a brief moment, it felt like justice had finally taken the wheel. But behind closed doors, the people who made it happen, they were paying the price. Darius Haynes sat alone in his office for the last time. The brass nameplate that once read Deputy Director was already gone. He had made up his mind. This wasn't about fear, it was about choice. If he stayed, the victory would be spun, politicized, twisted into agendas he never signed up for. He wouldn't let that happen. He typed a final note to his team, simple and clean. Justice can't be a career move. It has to be a calling. You answered that call. Now protect it. He closed the laptop and walked out without looking back. No headlines covered his exit. But those who mattered, they knew. Elsewhere, Clara Mendez sat across from an editor, stunned. "The nomination came through this morning," her boss said. "Your story's up for a Pulitzer." Clara didn't cry, but her hand trembled slightly on the coffee cup. Not because she wanted the glory, but because for once the truth hadn't cost her everything. "Are you going to submit more footage for the panel?" her editor asked. She shook her head. No, the story's not mine anymore. It belongs to the ones who lived it. That night, Celeste stood on a modest stage in Atlanta. The room was full, mostly women, mostly black, mostly quiet. But their eyes, they burned with the same fire Celeste once kept buried. The event was titled Trauma and Law, The Stories We Carry. She wore no makeup, no fancy suit, just her voice and Noah by her side. I never planned to become a symbol, she began softly. I just wanted to survive one drive home with my son. She paused, scanning the crowd. But survival can't be the finish line. We deserve peace, not just breath. A woman in the front row nodded slowly. Another wiped a tear. Behind them, one of the organizers quietly passed around small notebooks, encouraging attendees to write down what they'd never said aloud. Celeste reached into her handbag and pulled out Noah's drawing. The colors had faded, but the meaning never had. She held it up. This helped me more than any headline, any camera, any podium. She looked down at Noah, who leaned into her arm. Your drawing made me remember what I was fighting for. Outside the auditorium, protest signs still lined the fences. Some read Justice for All. Others said, Stop silencing us. But one simple and handwritten caught Clara's eye as she snapped a photo. Truth hurts, but it heals. And that was the thing about truth. It didn't erase the trauma. It didn't undo the bruises. It didn't make the fear vanish overnight. But it gave people the language to fight back. It forced silence to listen. It opened the door, even if it creaked, even if it fought. And for Celeste, for Darius, for Clara, and for a little boy with a box of crayons, that was enough, for now. It started with a bill, 5 pages, typed in black ink on white paper. But those 5 pages had blood in their margins, and names between the lines. They called it Celeste's Act. It wasn't glamorous, no flashy rollout or loud press conference, just a single proposal placed on the table of Congress. Every internal police complaint, whether closed or active, must be made accessible to civilian review panels. No more sealed files, no more buried names. At first it met resistance, but then something changed. Thousands of people began forwarding the story, the drawing, the courtroom clip, the woman who didn't take the $75,000. And before long, the petition appeared. The header read, Protect Our Children from Silence. Within 3 days, it had over 420,000 signatures. Most were from parents. Some added notes like, My son is 6. He's scared of sirens. We deserve to know what kind of badge is walking our streets. No child should think their mom did something wrong just for asking a question. Celeste didn't go on TV. She didn't tour newsrooms or speak on stages. She just kept teaching Sunday school at the little church where her mother once taught her. Miss Haynes, are you famous now? One kid asked, giggling as he colored a paper dove. She smiled softly. No, baby. I'm just louder now. That spring, the playground behind the church reopened after renovation. Fresh paint, new swings, smooth pavement for the first time in years. And on a warm Saturday morning, Noah ran again. He raced past the jungle gym, wind in his curls, his sneakers pounding the ground like thunder, like laughter, finally learned how to speak again. Celeste stood nearby, hand over her heart. Not because of fear, but because of how deeply peace can shake you when you've forgotten what it feels like. From across the field, Darius watched quietly. No suit, no badge, just a man in a plain shirt, arms folded, eyes steady. A church elder passed by and nodded. You did something good, brother. Darius didn't answer. He just exhaled through his nose, then turned and walked away, as if to say, mission complete. The bill moved slowly, as most good things do. But when it passed the House floor by a narrow but powerful vote, something remarkable happened. For the first time in decades, both sides of the aisle stood and clapped. Not for a politician, not for a party, but for the kind of justice that doesn't carry weapons, only truth. And so that's how it ended. Not with vengeance, not with applause, but with a law, with a boy laughing again, with a teacher back at her chalkboard, with a name no longer whispered but remembered, because justice doesn't always wear a uniform, but when it speaks, the nation listens.